Hi there, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and today we're talking about the brand new Praxis 7001 elementary education exam. This is a brand new test taking effect for most people who are required to take the exam in September 2024. Not all states are using this, but some states are. I want to go over it today. It's brand new, and I want to break down everything on this exam. Let's get started. All right, so there's a new test. It's the Praxis 7001, and it is a modified test from the traditional 5001. Now, I have books for both. You know, I always try to make the best products for you guys, and we just released our 7001 book. Now, not every state is using the 7001. It is brand new. Some states have already adopted it, and other states are deciding whether they are going to adopt it. Now, if you're someone who has been using the 5001, please do not be alarmed. Both tests are very similar. I'm going to go over the differences between the two today, and we're going to do some practice test questions from the 7001, specifically the teaching reading portion of the exam. So let's hop over to my presentation so I can show you the blueprints for both sections so you can kind of compare and contrast and see how the tests are different. Over here on the left-hand side is my 5001 book. Let me just go up to the main page here. So this is the 5001, and on the right-hand side, we have the 7001. So both are elementary education exams, but the 7001 is a new exam with some changes to the reading and language arts portion of the exam. So let me just show you here. This is the old blueprint here for the 5002. And this is the new blueprint here for the 7002. You can see that the 7002, which is the teaching reading subtest, is much more robust. So we have over here in the old one, 5002, we have reading, and then we have writing, speaking, and listening, just two content categories. The new test is not called reading and language arts, it's called teaching reading, and it has 5 main content categories. Now, in my book, I have added this 6th content category, which is assessment, data-driven decisions in reading instruction, because there is some focus on this exam. How do we assess these skills here? How do we assess these skills, phonics and decoding? How do we assess vocabulary and fluency, and so on and so forth? So I added this extra section in my book so you could get a very comprehensive view about how to use reading assessment to determine students' skills in these 5 areas, which is going to be very important on test day. Now, this is really the only thing that has changed. When it comes to the science and the social studies and the math, the 7001 is basically the same. Let's go up to the blueprint for the entire exam for each side. Let's go here. Okay, so you can see that this is the old one on the left-hand side, the 5001. So we have 4 subtests: 02, 03, 04, and 05. 02 is reading and language arts. 03 is mathematics, 04 is social studies, and 05 is science. Similarly, we have 7002, 03, 04, and 05 over here, but the 7002 is no longer reading and language arts. It's called teaching reading. And I just showed you the blueprint for that. But the math, the social studies, and the science remain the same. There is one other difference: the number of questions. So for the language arts, you still have 80 questions, but you have 20 extra minutes to answer those. And that is because they are a little bit more complicated than they were at the 5001. Now, if you use my methods for working backwards, and I'm going to show you how to do that when we go through the test questions in just a second, you're going to be fine. These scenario type questions end up being pretty easy when you use my good words, bad words strategy and how to navigate those scenario questions. But they are a little bit more robust. There's going to be a little bit more reading and figuring things out. And that's why they gave you some extra time here. So then what they had to do so that the test wasn't super long, they had to reduce the number of math questions. So we went from 50 questions to 40 questions. We went for social studies, we went from 60 to 55 questions. And for science, we went from 55 to 50 questions. And for those 3 sections, you get 55 minutes each. Now, it's not a huge deal. You might say, oh, 10 less or 10 fewer math questions. Yeah, that's great. That could be significant, but 5 fewer in the social studies and 5 fewer in the science isn't that big of a deal. I wouldn't focus too much on that. What I would do is get a comprehensive view of everything. And remember that this teaching reading section is going to focus on the science of teaching teaching reading. That is the systematic, explicit, and recursive approach to teaching. And I'm going to go through that when we go through the practice test questions. All right, so you can see that the 7001 is heavy on the teaching reading, and that is because as an elementary education teacher, you are first and foremost a literacy instructor or a reading teacher. And so they want to make sure that you understand the science of teaching reading, and I go over that very extensively in this book. We have a teaching reading book. There is another test called teaching reading. It's the 5205, and it has that very explicit, systematic, and recursive approach. This part of the book, the 7002, is modeled after that. So, and that's what they did. They took that test and put it in the front of this test. That's basically what they did. So that is the 7001. Let's go through a few practice test questions that come from my brand new book, so you can see how those teaching reading questions are laid out. And we'll also do a little bit of math, a little bit of social studies, and a little bit of science. All right, so let's start off with some 7002 questions, which is about the teaching reading process. This one comes from the study guide. And I always like to look at my answer choices first, but in this case, I can't do much because these are just skills. Identify all three letters in the word, identify medial sounds in words, decode the word by using grammar rules, string together blends in words. Okay, it looks like I need to read the question. So let's go here. A student in the partial alphabetic phase says the word sun and identifies the s and n sounds. So a couple things going on here. We have partial alphabetic, which means the student is understanding some sounds or some letters in the word. What would be the most appropriate next step to take with the student? This is why it's a little bit harder than the original 5002. This is the systematic approach to teaching reading. There are phases or steps in which students go through in order to figure this out. And typically, when students are learning words, the sounds in words, they hear the hard consonants first, the s and the n. The medial or middle vowel sounds come later. The comes later for sun. But they hear the s, n first. Those are the things they can identify first. So identify all three letters in the word. That doesn't really do much in terms of understanding sounds. So I'm going to cross that off. Identify medial sounds in words. This is the next step because I went s, n. Now I need to figure out the sun, sound. Decode the word by using grammar rules. This is a little bit more complex than the partial alphabetic stage. This would come later in phonics, so C is out. D, string together blends in words. That would come after identifying the medial sound, because then once we know it's we would then say sun. We would blend it all together. So D is out, making B the correct answer. Now, this is addressed explicitly in our study guide, but the medial sounds or the middle sounds in the word, or the vowel sounds in the middle of the word, come after the hard consonant sounds in this partial alphabetic stage. So you have to know a few things for this. You have to know partial alphabetic, pre-alphabetic, partial alphabetic, full alphabetic, consolidated alphabetic. That is the alphabetic principle. You also have to understand the systematic way in which students understand sounds and words, and then you have to identify the next step. This is the science of teaching reading and is much more difficult than you might think when it comes to the exam. All right, let's have a look at this one. This one's more scenario-based, and I can see I have assessments. All right, let's read the answer choices first, always working backwards. Using formative and summative assessments. Okay. If you've read the study guide, and you probably haven't yet, but if you're going to get it, you will see that formative and summative assessments are very good assessments to use. Formatives are informal assessments. Summatives come at the end of learning and measure outcomes, and they're a little more formal. I like A only because using both formative and summative is very good. It's comprehensive. I'm going to put a little dot next to it. B, using criterion referenced and norm referenced assessments. Okay. As a teacher, I'm definitely using criterion referenced assessments because those are standards-based assessments. I may use some norm referenced. I don't know. The norm referenced are usually given by the state in order to figure out student-to-student performance. I'm not in love with B. I like A better. I'm just reading through these to get an understanding of what's in the answer choices. So Eliminating ones right now may not be the best bet, but I'm just getting to know these answer choices. C, using code-based and meaning-based assessments. Okay, so this has to do with code-based is phonics and meaning-based is vocabulary or comprehension. When we teach phonics, we are teaching students the codes in words. For example, in the word make, there's a code here. This A is long because of this silent E. That's the rule or the code inside the words. So that's a phonics. Meaning comes later. And that is one where we're assessing comprehension. What does it all mean? How does it all come together? So these are two different types of assessments I like as well. I'm going to put a dot next to C. So A and C are in the running. D, use performance-based assessments and problem-based assessments. Performance-based and problem-based assessments are kind of the same thing. Students are having to perform or solve something. I don't love D as much as I love A and C, especially if I'm talking about the science of teaching reading. If I'm talking about teaching reading, I'm definitely using formative and summative, and I'm definitely using code-based and meaning-based. Now, if I'm really thinking like a test maker, which I tell you guys to do, think like a test maker, not a test taker. Notice how different the code-based versus meaning-based assessments are. Formative and summative, criterion referenced, norm referenced, and performance-based and problem-based are all those like traditional type assessments that we talk about a lot. Code-based and meaning-based are specific for reading skills. So C stands out if I'm thinking like a test maker. And I always tell you guys to do that. Now, if you're brand new and you don't know the difference between or among all of these, that's totally fine. I, of course, write these books, so I see these patterns very easily, but just be on the lookout. Get to know those answer choices first, and then kind of go into the scenario here. It'll help you decipher among all of these crazy answer choices and figure out the scenario. Let's read. Research suggests that students need to focus on phonological skills and word recognition, along with comprehension and vocabulary. Okay. It is important that teachers assess both areas to effectively measure students' reading abilities. Which of the following assessments do that? Okay, let's say that you don't really know the specifics about which assessment assesses what, but formative and summative assessments, that's kind of overarching. They cover everything. So do performance-based, so do criterion referenced. C, which is the answer, code-based has to do with the codes in words. For example, b, a, t. That is phonological awareness or phonemic awareness. And we use the different codes in words to do that. Meaning would be comprehension and vocabulary. So that's why C is the best answer. These are specific to reading skills, and you're assessing in both areas. Code-based is the sounding out of words, the individual sounds in words based on the code. And then meaning-based is what do they mean? Comprehension, how do we put it all together? And that's why C is the best answer there. That's why it's very important to approach the teaching reading section of this exam very specifically, because there are some very tough questions on this part of the exam. And if you're brand new to teaching, it's going to be difficult. All right, let's have a look at number 38. Again, this is part of the teaching reading section, and you can see it's very long. There's a scenario, and this is going to be a little bit more difficult. All right, let's look at the answer choices first. See if I can eliminate any bad words and zero in on good words. A, have students make a list of words they do not understand and post the words to the wall in front of the classroom. All right, I don't love A only because it doesn't do anything to really help students. Make a list and then post them. What about evaluating them? What about looking them up? What about using them in context? A is not great, crossing it off. B, use direct, explicit instruction. Oh, good word, good word, good word. By incorporating short videos and pictures to show the words in different contexts. Yes, all of these are good words on the reading exam because teaching reading is explicit, systematic, and recursive. And when we're talking about vocab, we want to think about context. B's got a bunch of good words in it. I'm going to circle it. C, give students a graphic organizer. I like graphic organizer, where they can sort the words and categorize them into what they know and what they don't know. Okay, this is a great beginning strategy with the words. B is much more direct and explicit, which means we're giving students a more robust kind of exposure to the words. C is just kind of organizing the words into what we know and don't know. I don't hate it, but I don't love it as much as B. I'm going to put a dot next to it. D, as students come to difficult words, have students look them up in a dictionary and write down their definitions. No, This is not effective. Stopping the reading and looking up words in a dictionary. I understand dictionaries are great. They're a great supplemental tool, but we would want to use context clues to figure out the word first. Certainly we're going to use dictionaries, but on this exam, dictionary tends to be a bad word. Not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time. I'm going to cross off D. So I'm between B and C. Let's go ahead and look. Students are reading trade books about plants, and much of the information include their tier 3 vocabulary like chloroplasts, vacuoles, and photosynthesis. Okay, a couple things going on here. Trade books are informational text where students kind of read about things like this, like photosynthesis, and they have pictures and graphs, and they really help students understand more complex ideas. And then it says tier 3 vocabulary. Tier 3 vocabulary is part of the academic domain, which means the vocabulary is very complex. Chloroplast, vacuole, and photosynthesis. These are specific to a certain content area. You're not going to see these in everyday reading. You're going to see these as tier 3 words, which means we have to go over these words specifically for science. How can the teacher support the students while reading? Well, in this case, we need direct and explicit instruction and maybe even some short videos to show students what is a chloroplast, what does it does, what does it do, what is a vacuole, what is photosynthesis. That's why B is the best. Graphic organizer, where they sort the words into what they know and don't know, that's not going to help them figure out the words. So B is the best answer, and we got that before ever looking at the question. So work backwards, think like a test maker, and zero in on those good words. All right, now let's go to the math. So this is the 7003. All right, let's have a look at the math, very similar to the other elementary ed exams. So we have a word problem here. I have my answer choices, and I just need to solve for inches. Okay, let's look at the question. An artist made a scale drawing of a mural he is painting on the side of a building. The building is 10 feet tall and 80 feet wide. The scale of inches, this is important, scale of inches used to make the drawing is 3 by 40 or 3 to 40. How wide is the scale drawing? Okay, this is a proportion. How do I know that? I have the term scale and I have this. This is a ratio. Whenever we're given that, we know we can set up a proportion. So what I like to do is set up two fractions equal to one another and solve. All right. So let's figure out what we have. And there's some extra information in here that we don't need. The question asks, how wide is the scale drawing? Okay. So right now we have this 3 to 40. For every 3 inches, it's 40 feet. For every 3 inches in the drawing, it's actually 40 feet in real life. Okay. So this is the scale in which we're using inches over feet. Inches over feet equals inches over feet. Keep it matchy-matchy on both sides. Now it's asking how wide. It says it's 10 feet tall, 80 feet wide. We're actually figuring out how wide is the scale drawing. So make sure we put the 80 where the feet portion is. We don't know what the scale is to that. An artist made a scale drawing of a mural he is painting on the building. The building is 10 feet to 80 feet wide. We have our 80 feet wide because it's asking how wide. The scale of inches to feet used is 3 to 40. 3 inches equals 40 feet. How many inches is the scale drawing? How wide? In inches is the scale drawing. Okay, so now what we can do is cross multiply and solve. And we have 3 times 80, which is 240 equals 40x. Solve for x. Divide by 40, and we get x equals 6. So it's 6 inches equals that 80 feet. A is the correct answer. Let's do a little social studies. So this one comes from the 7004 portion of the exam. Let's have a look at the answer choices. Reading primary source documents from factory workers during that time. In the social studies section, if you get a scenario, primary source is really, really good. We want to use primary and secondary sources, a combination of both in social studies. And a primary source comes straight from the person who lived the experience. So if we're reading primary source documents from factory workers during a certain time, it might be letters, it might be some sort of correspondence. That's going to tell you exactly what that person was going through because it came straight from that person's mouth. A secondary source might be the textbook telling you about that factory worker or what was going on there. But the primary source is straight from the person experiencing it. So I like A. Anytime I see primary source or a combination of primary and secondary, I'm going to put a little dot by it. B, watching a documentary of the technology advancements. All right. Typically, videos for social studies is not the correct answer. Using snippets of a video is, but watching an entire documentary, I'm going to cross that off. It's a bad word on this portion of the exam. C, creating a timeline of events and inventions during the Industrial Revolution. Timelines are good. It's a type of graphic organizer. I like it. A, I like better. I'm going to circle A, but C is okay too. D, participating in a debate on the social and economic impacts of industrialization. All right, debate is good. That's kind of your evidence-based discussion. Good there. I'd like it better if it said evidence-based discussion. A debate is kind of, but I'll keep it. Let's have a look at the question. A fourth grade teacher wants to help students understand the working conditions of factory workers during the Industrial Revolution. The class has already read from the textbook, so that's a secondary source, and discussed the working conditions. Which activity would be most effective in enhancing their understanding of this time? Well, A, reading that primary source document is going to enhance it because they're going to get it straight from the person who experienced it. A timeline on the major inventions, be careful here. A timeline's great, but the inventions, that's not going to help them understand what workers are going through. That's just going to show the good inventions at that time. So C is out. D, in a debate, it's okay, but that gives my kind of opinion based on what I read. That's not going to help me understand the way workers really felt. So D is out, making A the best answer. And finally, let's have a look at science. This is from the 7005. This is an example of a life science question. So let's have a look at the answer choices. Evolution is a type of change that happens over thousands of years. Okay. Some species reproduce sexually and some reproduce asexually. True. C, trait variation can lead to natural selection and adaptation. Yes, that is true, but that's about heredity and things like that. D, mutations are changes in the DNA molecule caused by mistakes during cell division. Okay, this is a little bit about reproduction as well. So, all four could be it. Let's read the question. Which of the following statements indicate students understand how traits in populations may give some members a reproductive advantage? Well, a reproductive advantage has to do with natural selection. When you have inherited traits accidentally, by the way, this is not something that you can do, or you can manipulate. But when you inherit a trait, and let's say that maybe you inherit the trait for being short or small, right? Let's just say it's bugs. I'm giving a very simplified example here, but let's say you're a bug and you inherit a trait for being tiny and all the other bugs in your, community are big. Well, guess what? They get picked off by the birds more easily. You're able to hide and hang out with the other small bugs, right? And then you reproduce with these small bugs and you make more smaller bugs and they survive because they're tiny and they can hide from the birds, right? And now we have this natural selection where the tiny bugs in this species reproduce and they kind of grow. Whereas the bigger, fatter bugs where the birds picked them off, maybe they go extinct. This is, again, very simplified thing, but that is natural selection. You have inherited some sort of trait variation that gives you an edge, which leads to natural selection and adaptation of a species. C is the best answer. And we go through all of this in the book and in the online course. All right, so that brings us to the end of the video. Hopefully you have a little bit more understanding about this brand new exam, the 7001. Let me show you where to get our resources. So if you'd like to study for this exam with comprehensive materials, you can do so using our products. Let's have a look at that. So there are a couple of ways in which you can get help for this exam. If you just go to KathleenJasper.com, you can go to study guides here, elementary education, and you can click the 7001. We do offer it as subtests as well. Let's say you pass, all but one subtest and you only need one. You can do that, but most of you will need the full book. So you can do that here. It comes in a digital download that is sent to your email. But if you'd like a physical book, you can just click this. It'll take you to Amazon and you can order the book straight from Amazon and it comes to you in a couple days via Amazon Prime. This is the physical book, and it is almost 600 pages. So don't print it out if you want a physical copy. If you want a physical copy, just click that button here on the product page to take you to Amazon. If you prefer a digital download, just click add to cart. When you do and check out, it will be sent to your email. Now, if you're interested in the online course where I go through tons of videos and explanations and everything else, you can go under our online courses, click Praxis 7001. And when you do, it'll take you to the option to purchase the online course. Now, this is very comprehensive and will take you a lot of time to get through. There's a robust 7002 section where I have videos for everything that is covered on the exam. We have practice test questions. I go over the practice test questions. We do this for every section. The math, I go through every single math problem in the book, in the videos. So it's comprehensive. So if you need more help, I definitely recommend the online course. It comes with the digital study guide, so you don't have to buy anything extra. It comes with everything you need, but you're going to need some time to get through it because there's a lot of video content and a lot of stuff to get through. So give yourself some time if you go with the online course. All right, so that's it regarding our 7001 Praxis Elementary Education. Make sure that you take the time to study and really get to know the sections in that exam. Of course, we have awesome materials to help you with that. Go to KathleenJasper.com. If you have any comments or questions, you can put them in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram, everywhere else. If you like shorter versions of videos, you can go to TikTok and you'll find me there. And you can email us at info@KathleenJasper.com if you have any more specific questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video today. Have an awesome day. Bye.